He blocked his wife's salary thinking she'd crawl back, but she rose so high he now waits for her approval. If you want to know how everything flipped, stay tuned, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories. Daniel Okoro had always been the kind of man people looked at and said, "Lucky guy." He had a stable bank job, a pretty wife, a neat apartment in Port Harcourt, and a life that seemed polished enough for Instagram highlights. But behind all that shine, his biggest problem was the one thing nobody could see: his pride. And nothing bruised Daniel's pride more than the growing success of his wife, Ivie. Ivie wasn't loud, flashy, or rebellious. She was quiet, calculating, and effortlessly brilliant, the type of woman who could balance 5 company accounts in her head while cooking Sunday stew. When they first got married, Daniel admired her intelligence. But admiration slowly turned into discomfort, then insecurity, and now resentment. It started innocently. Ivie got a promotion at work, then another. Each one came with a higher salary and more recognition from her colleagues. People started calling her the backbone of the finance department, the genius, the calm mathematician. Daniel pretended to be proud, but deep inside he hated how the spotlight shifted. His own friends, especially Kelvin, the loud, shallow one, didn't make things any better. "Guy, how you go allow your wife day on like that? Soon she go day command you," Kelvin would joke. Daniel laughed, but the words clung to his mind like stubborn stains. The final push came at a dinner with friends. One of Ivie's colleagues told a story about how she solved a major audit problem that saved the company thousands of naira. Everyone clapped. Daniel smiled stiffly, but something broke inside him. "This woman is turning me into the wife," he muttered under his breath when nobody was listening. That night, lying next to Ivie as she slept peacefully, Daniel stared at the ceiling with one thought burning through him: "I must take back control." And from that moment, his plan began to form, quiet, dark, and rooted in a fear he refused to admit. Daniel didn't want a partner. He wanted dominance. And the first thing he planned to take from her wasn't love. It was her financial freedom. The tension began with something small, something Daniel thought Ivie would never notice. He started managing the household expenses, reminding her more often that as the head of the home, he should be the one handling the finances. Ivie didn't argue. She never liked financial chaos anyway. But the way Daniel insisted, the way he pushed her to transfer her savings into their joint account, the way he kept asking for her password, it all felt slightly off. Still, Ivie trusted her husband. She believed in teamwork. Daniel believed in control. One Saturday morning, while Ivie prepared breakfast, Kelvin came to visit. Loud, laughing, shameless. "My man," he shouted, clapping Daniel on the back. Then he turned to Ivie, barely acknowledging her with a nod before turning back. "Daniel, you see as your wife fine like this? Women like this get options. Better cage 'em small before she turn ogre." Daniel laughed harder than the joke deserved. Ivie's hand froze for a second, the sound of Kelvin's words hitting her ear like a sting, but she brushed it off. When Kelvin left, Daniel turned serious. "Babe, we really need to centralize our finances. It's safer if everything enters one place. Banks are doing anyhow these days." Ivie blinked. "I thought we already had a joint account." "Yes," he said smoothly, "but it's better if your salary enters that account directly. It makes planning easier." It didn't sit right with her. Something in her chest tightened, but she forced a smile. "Okay, if it helps the family, then fine." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You're a good woman." But inside him, pride smiled viciously. He had taken the first small step. And when a man like Daniel takes one step, he convinces himself he deserves the entire staircase. Ivie didn't know it, but Daniel had been studying her patterns for weeks, what time her salary dropped, which app she checked, which bank she trusted. He needed full control, and he didn't want her to clue into anything until it was too late. One morning, while she was in the shower, Daniel found her debit card in her handbag. He slipped it out, memorized a number, and slid it back in. Later that day at work, he walked into his bank branch and told the customer service officer he wanted to update some details for his wife's account. Being a staff member gave him the advantage. Nobody questioned him. "I want her card restricted temporarily. Fraud concerns." He lied easily. The officer nodded, processed it, and within minutes, Ivie's access was cut off. Her card still worked physically. The app still opened. But the real access, the actual ability to withdraw, track, or use her own money, was gone. Daniel felt powerful for the first time in a long time. That evening, Ivie mentioned casually, "My salary didn't alert this morning." "Network," Daniel said. "Everyone is complaining." Ivie nodded, not suspecting anything. She trusted too much, believed too deeply. Daniel sat beside her, smiling softly as she leaned on him. In his head, a darker smile curled. "She is in the palm of my hand now." But what Daniel didn't know was that life had a strange way of turning circles. And the tighter he squeezed that hand, the faster things would slip between his fingers. For a week, Daniel studied Ivie's reactions carefully. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't suspicious. She simply assumed it was a bank glitch, which made Daniel push further. He visited the bank again and instructed them to redirect all salary inflows to a private account they shared, except this private account was one he controlled entirely. "My wife is too busy to come here. Please just move it." "I'll tell her later," he said with confidence. Being staff again worked in his favor. Nobody questioned him. Meanwhile, Ivie noticed her account balance wasn't increasing as usual. "Daniel, did your salary drop?" she asked one night. "Yes, yours too." He lied. "There's a system cleanup. A lot of people are affected." Ivie frowned but nodded. She trusted him. That trust, pure, innocent, undeserved, gave Daniel more access than any password. He began watching her like she was a subject in his experiment. How much money she needed weekly, what she could survive on, when she would break. "Babe, I'll handle groceries this week," he said suddenly one evening. "Relax." She looked at him in surprise. "Really?" "Yes. I'm the man of the house. Let me do my job." Ivie smiled warmly. "Thank you." Daniel walked away feeling triumphant. The control was almost complete. But the more he gained, the more he wanted. And like every man drowning in ego, he was too blind to see the wave that was slowly rising behind him. The first crack appeared at a supermarket on a quiet Tuesday evening. Ivie had decided to pick a few groceries on her way home. Nothing serious. Bread, milk, vegetables. She pushed her cart to the payment counter, chatting softly with the cashier. Then she inserted her card. Declined. She frowned. Tried again. Declined. The cashier tried manually. Declined. People in line began whispering. Ivie felt a sting of embarrassment shoot through her chest. She stepped aside, breathing deeply. She called Daniel. "My card isn't working." "Ah, that useless bank," Daniel hissed, pretending to be annoyed. "I'll take care of it. Come home." But when she got home, he was smiling smugly. "Babe, relax. These banks can frustrate someone." Meanwhile, here, he extended a few crisp notes. "Take this for the week. Manage it." Ivie stared at the money. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. She wasn't a child. She wasn't unemployed. She earned good money, money she worked hard for. Why was she suddenly depending on him for pocket change? Daniel's eyes watched her closely, waiting for her to crumble, to panic, to beg for answers. But Ivie didn't. She accepted the money quietly, her face unreadable. That night, while Daniel slept like a man victorious, Ivie lay awake beside him, eyes open in the darkness. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't naive. She knew something was happening, something big, something intentional. She didn't know exactly what Daniel had done. But a storm began forming silently inside her. A storm Daniel was too arrogant to prepare for. He thought he had won, but the war had only just begun. Daniel's confidence grew like a weed once he saw Ivie's reaction to the card embarrassment. She didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't even raise her voice. She accepted the situation quietly, and to a man like Daniel, silence looked like defeat. The next morning he woke up feeling powerful, chest high, ego inflated. He whistled while dressing for work, acting like a man who had conquered a kingdom. Ivie watched him from the bed, her face calm but her mind racing. She hadn't slept well. Something was deeply wrong, and she wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. She analyzed, observed, calculated. But Daniel took her silence as submission and pushed the control further. That afternoon, he walked into his bank and requested a salary redirection form. His voice was confident, too confident for someone sabotaging his own wife. He signed the necessary documents and watched as Ivie's salary was rerouted entirely into an account that only he could touch. As he left the bank, Kelvin called him. "Guy, how far? You do 'em." Daniel chuckled smugly. "All under control. She no fit misbehave again." Kelvin laughed that loud, foolish laugh that made Daniel feel like a champion. Meanwhile, Ivie was at work, reviewing financial reports and noticing how the numbers in the world made perfect sense, yet the numbers in her own account didn't. She quietly printed her last 3 salary slips, checked her account statements, and circled the dates. The inconsistency was too sharp to ignore. On her lunch break, she called the bank. "Hello, please, my salary hasn't been dropping. Can you check?" The lady on the phone hesitated. "Madam, I'm seeing that your salary is being redirected to a joint account." "Which joint account?" Ivie asked slowly. "The one your husband manages. He made the change." Ivie froze. A cold stillness washed over her. Not anger, clarity. She said thank you, ended the call, and sat still for a long moment. That was the day Ivie finally understood. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a mistake. Daniel wasn't confused. He was deliberate. And just like that, something inside Ivie hardened. Not resentment. Not fear. Something far more dangerous. Resolve. Daniel had crossed a line, and he had no idea the storm that was about to rise. By the time Daniel returned home that evening, Ivie had finished cooking, cleaned the living room, and set the table. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. He stepped inside, inhaled the aroma, and grinned. "Ah, my wife. This is why I say women need structure. You dey behave well now." Ivie smiled faintly. "Welcome." The way she said it was controlled, calm, almost emotionless. But Daniel didn't notice. Ego blinds men like him. He sat, ate, and talked like someone who had conquered a small country. "You know," he said with a mouthful of rice, "I'm thinking of handling all our bills from now on. It's easier if one person leads." Ivie nodded. "If that's what you want." The softness of her voice made him swell in pride. He thought he had finally reduced her to dependence. After dinner, he handed her another small amount of money. "This is for the week. Don't waste it." Her fingers paused slightly on the notes. The insult burned, but she swallowed it. "Thank you," she whispered. Something in her tone, something too calm, made Daniel pause for half a second, but he shrugged it off. After all, in his mind, the mission was successful. Ivie cleaned the dishes quietly while her mind worked non-stop. She replayed every sign she had ignored, every lie he told, every manipulation disguised as leadership. A painful truth settled in her chest. Daniel didn't see her as a partner. He saw her as property, a tool, a subordinate. That night, when Daniel slept snoring loudly, Ivie took her phone, opened a notepad, and began writing. Step 1, update CV. Step 2, call Mrs. Yusuf. Step 3, apply for external positions. Step 4, secure independence. Her eyes hardened as she typed the final line. Step 5, take back control, with dignity. She put down the phone and watched Daniel sleep, unaware that his little empire control had just begun to crumble, silently, methodically, and with the precision of a woman pushed too far. 3 days later, Ivie's opportunity came, unexpected, powerful, and perfectly timed. While at work, her boss, Mrs. Amina Yusuf, summoned her. "Ivie, sit," she said warmly. "I've been watching your performance these past months. You're one of the most brilliant minds in this department." Ivie blinked, genuinely surprised. "Thank you, Ma." Mrs. Yusuf leaned forward. "Have you ever considered taking on something bigger? Because a partner company of ours is looking for a senior financial controller, someone with your precision." Ivie felt her heartbeat shift. A senior controller. Yes, it's a major company, much larger, higher pay, more authority. For the first time in weeks, Hope flickered inside her. Fresh air, a new path, growth. Would you be interested? I can recommend you. Ivy inhaled slowly. Yes, I would. Good. Prepare your documents. The interview is in 4 days. Ivy left the office feeling both terrified and exhilarated. Everything Daniel had taken from her financially suddenly felt irrelevant. He thought he had locked her down, but he didn't know he had only pushed her forward. That evening, she came home quiet as usual. Daniel didn't notice the fire behind her eyes. He spent the night bragging about minor achievements at work, laughing loudly at Kelvin's messages, and talking about how women need a guiding hand. Ivy listened, observed. Her silence deepened, not from weakness, but from purpose. Every sentence Daniel spoke became another reason to rise higher. And in that silence, a new version of Ivy was being born, stronger, smarter, and ready to reclaim everything he stole. The night before the interview, Daniel noticed Ivy ironing a different kind of outfit. Clean, sharp, formal, authoritative. Where you day go tomorrow? He asked casually. Work, she answered calmly. He frowned. Why are you ironing like say you get presentation? Just want to look good, she replied softly. Daniel shrugged and walked away, thinking nothing of it. The next morning, Ivy left the house earlier than usual. Daniel didn't bother asking why. He believed he had her exactly where he wanted her, dependent, silent, obedient. Meanwhile, Ivy walked into one of the biggest corporate offices in the city. The interview wasn't just challenging, it was intense. But Ivy's mind, sharpened by weeks of emotional endurance, was unstoppable. She analyzed, explained, solved, and impressed. Mr. Basie, the CEO, leaned back afterward and said, "You don't just understand numbers, you command them." That evening, she returned home tired but hopeful. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. Where you day since? Work, she answered with the same practiced calm. He grunted. Next time, tell me before you stay long. Ivy nodded, although she owed him no explanation. Later that night, as Daniel snored again, Ivy's phone vibrated silently. She picked it up slowly. Congratulations. You have been selected as our new senior financial controller. Ivy stared at the message. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with triumph. She turned and looked at Daniel. The man who thought he had clipped her wings was about to witness a fly higher than he could ever reach. And the sweetest part, he wouldn't see it coming. Daniel first sensed something when Ivy came home unusually composed the next day. Not quiet, composed, controlled, peaceful, a kind of peace he didn't understand. How was work? He asked. Good, she replied with a small smile. Something about that smile irritated him. It wasn't the smile of someone dependent. It wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It was a smile of someone who knew something he didn't. That annoyed Daniel deeply. Later that evening, while using his office system, a file flashed across his screen, a corporate payroll list from the very company Ivy had interviewed with. He scrolled casually until a name nearly knocked the air out of his lungs. Ivy Okoro, Senior Financial Controller, 1,200,000 Nigerian nairas monthly. Daniel's throat went dry. His heart hammered. His hands trembled. He blinked again. It wasn't a mistake. His wife, the woman he tried to financially shrink, now earned nearly double his salary. He sat frozen in his chair, chest tight, mind spinning. How? When? Who recommended her? How did she get there without me knowing? He went home early, trying to act calm, but Ivy greeted him with the same peaceful smile. You're back early. Daniel stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You got a promotion. Ivy tilted her head gently. Yes. Daniel swallowed hard. Why you no tell me? You didn't ask, she replied softly. That response broke him more than any insult could. For the first time in their marriage, Daniel felt something he had never felt toward Ivy. Fear. Not fear of losing her. Fear of losing control. Fear of realizing she was never beneath him. Fear of what she had become. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. Daniel barely slept that night. He kept tossing, turning, replaying everything in his head. How had Ivy moved so far ahead without him even sensing it? How had he missed the signs? He stared at her as she slept peacefully beside him, and for the first time, he saw her not as a quiet wife he controlled, but as a stranger whose rise he couldn't predict. By morning, he had convinced himself it was a fluke. Maybe she would struggle in the role. Maybe she would break under pressure. Maybe he still had some power left. He dressed up for work, adjusting his tie with shaky hands, and forced a confident smile. "Babe, congratulations again," he said awkwardly. Ivy nodded. "Thank you." Her calmness irritated him more. At work, Daniel couldn't focus. He kept thinking about his salary. How did she get ahead of him? He blamed Kelvin. He blamed her boss. He blamed the world, but he never blamed himself. When he tried to brag to his colleagues about his own achievements, they didn't seem impressed. Instead, they asked, "Your wife works at Besa Holdings now? That's Huzo." Daniel forced a laugh, but jealousy burned in his chest. His phone buzzed. It was Kelvin. "Guy, I hear your wife land big jobo. How you lose God like that?" The mocking tone nearly made Daniel throw his phone. "I didn't lose anything," he snapped. "I'm still in control." But the words tasted like lies. That evening he returned home tense, trying to act normal. Ivy served dinner, thanked him calmly when he said the food was good, and moved with a quiet dignity that made him feel small. She didn't gloat. She didn't brag. She didn't throw her success in his face. She didn't need to. Her silence had changed, not the silence of fear, but of someone who had stepped into power. Daniel watched her with growing unease. He didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath his feet had already started shifting. 2 days later, Ivy began her new job officially. She left the house early wearing a crisp suit Daniel had never seen her wear before. She carried herself with a new posture, one born from competence and confidence, not arrogance, not show-off, just self-assurance. Daniel felt threatened instantly. "Why you day dressed like this?" he asked. "It's my first day," Ivy replied. "I have meetings." Something in her voice was different, stronger, steadier. She kissed his cheek lightly. "Have a good day." Daniel stood frozen, wondering when she became someone who could shake him with a simple sentence. At work, Ivy walked into the massive building of Besa Holdings and was met with respect she had never felt before. Teams greeted her with "Good morning, Ma," and "Welcome, Ma." She met with the CEO again, who gave her a full tour of the financial department, showing her where she would operate, the accounts she would oversee, and the transfers she would be responsible for approving. It was overwhelming but empowering. Meanwhile, Daniel rushed through his tasks at the bank, his anxiety rising. His manager called him. "We'll be collaborating with Besa Holdings financial controller soon. They're increasing security." Daniel nodded nervously. A small voice in his chest whispered a warning he refused to believe. After work, he decided to test something. When he got home, he said, "Babe, I need 20,000. Lend me small." Ivy looked at him, expression unreadable, then simply asked, "Why?" Daniel blinked. She had never asked why before. "Because I need it," he stammered. Ivy nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll give you." But her calm tone made Daniel feel like the borrower, like the dependent one, like the one without control. As she handed him the money, she looked straight into his eyes, not defiantly, not angrily, but knowingly. That look told him she was no longer the woman he once manipulated. That night, for the first time, Daniel understood a bitter truth. Ivy had outgrown the box he tried to lock her in, and he didn't know how to handle a version of her that stepped out. A week passed, and Daniel's anxiety continued to rise. He noticed Ivy was no longer asking him for anything. No money, no permission, no explanations. She simply lived. She worked late some days, arrived home with a quiet professionalism, and handled herself with a confidence that made Daniel feel like the supporting character in his own home. One evening, he tried to reassert dominance. "You've been coming home late. You should be telling me your schedule," he said sharply. Ivy looked at him with calm eyes. "Daniel, I'm working." "And so," he snapped, "I'm your husband. I need to know what you're doing." Ivy didn't raise her voice. "You're my husband, not my manager. If you want to know how my day went, ask with respect." Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't like this version of her, assertive, composed, unshaken. He tried to provoke her. All this confidence, it's because of your salary, ABI? Money has entered your head. Ivy looked at him, and for the first time, her gaze carried a subtle fire. Confidence comes from knowing your worth, not from controlling someone else's. That sentence hit Daniel like a punch. That night, he sat in bed, watching her as she typed on her laptop, working on corporate reports. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to make him feel small. She was simply existing, brilliantly, and that alone threatened him. By the end of the week, Daniel realized he had made the worst mistake of his life. He had awakened a version of Ivy that could not be bullied, manipulated, or controlled. A version that didn't need him for validation. A version that could stand on her own. And the more he realized this, the more fear crept into him. Fear that he had not only lost control, but might lose her entirely. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon inside Daniel's office. It began like an ordinary workday until a routine corporate payroll file from Basic Holdings arrived on his system. He clicked it casually, scrolling through the list of names, until one line made his breath freeze. Ivie Okoro, Senior Financial Controller, 1,200,000 Nigerian nairas monthly. He stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. His heart pounded in his chest. He clicked the line again, thinking maybe he misread it. But the figures remained the same. His wife now earned almost twice his salary. His hand began to shake. Cold sweat formed on his forehead. 1,000 thoughts flooded his mind. How did she get this job? When did she apply? Why didn't she tell me? How did she do all this while I was busy controlling her salary? Reality hit him like thunder. While he was plotting how to shrink her, she was quietly rising above him. He sat there frozen for several minutes, unable to process the humiliation. His colleague walked by. "Ah, Daniel, I see your wife is a new controller at Basic Holdings. Congratulations, oh. You marry correct woman." Daniel forced a smile that nearly cracked his face. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't accept what the universe had just served him. That evening, he rushed home early. Ivy was in the kitchen. You got a big promotion," he stuttered. "Yes," she said quietly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked," she replied calmly, "and because I needed to stand on my own." Daniel felt something collapse inside him. His arrogance, his fake dominance, his illusion of control. For the first time, he realized Ivy didn't need him. She only chose him, and that choice was slipping away. From the moment Daniel discovered Ivy's salary, panic became his shadow. He began waking up before her, watching her silently as if trying to understand the stranger she had become. At work, he overcompensated, acting extra important, laughing too loudly, trying to prove he wasn't shaken. But everyone could see it. Daniel was rattled. At home, he tried being unusually nice. "Babe, should I help you cut vegetables?" Ivy looked at him with gentle suspicion. "No, thank you." "Should I drop you at work tomorrow?" "No need." "You want ice cream?" "I fit by." "I'm okay." The more she remained calm, the more frantic he became. He started cleaning the house randomly, buying things he didn't need, hovering around her like a man desperate to regain relevance. One evening, he tried to start a deep conversation. "Ivy, are you okay with me? Are we good?" Ivy looked at him quietly. "I'm fine, Daniel. I just understand things better now." "Understand what?" he asked nervously. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Daniel's insecurity reached its peak when Kelvin called him again. "Guy, you day here? Your wife day blow for that company, oh. She go soon big past you." Daniel ended the call angrily. That night, while Ivy worked on her laptop, Daniel paced the room. You know fit be bigger than me, right?" he blurted. Ivy looked up slowly. "Daniel, growth is not a competition." "It is," he shouted, voice cracking. "It is when you're my wife." Ivy closed her laptop gently. "Your ego is not my responsibility." That sentence shattered him. He stormed out of the room, chest heaving, heart aching. He had wanted her to crawl, to depend on him, to be afraid of losing him. But here he was, the one terrified of losing her. And deep down, he knew the truth. The more he tried to control Ivie, the more he pushed her into a version of herself that no longer needed his permission, his approval, or his protection. The man who wanted to shrink her was now the one shrinking in the shadow of her growth. The shift in power became undeniable when Daniel's bank announced a new restructuring policy. All major corporate transfers above a certain amount would now require external approval from the client company's designated financial controller. It was meant to reduce fraud and enhance transparency, a perfectly normal policy in the financial world. But for Daniel, it was the beginning of his greatest nightmare. The moment the memo was read during their morning briefing, Daniel's chest tightened. His manager continued, "For Besa Holdings, approvals must now be processed directly through their senior financial controller. I expect full cooperation." Daniel swallowed hard. Besa Holdings, senior financial controller. Ivie. Suddenly, the room spun. He stared at the memo, the words burning into him. This wasn't just any company. This wasn't just any approval officer. This was his wife, the same woman whose salary he blocked, whose financial freedom he crushed, whose account he manipulated, whose quiet pain he ignored. And now she was a final checkpoint between him and his work success. The irony felt like a slap from the universe. He sat frozen, the shame building like heat beneath his skin. His colleagues chatted excitedly. "That company is big-o. Their controller go get serious power now. I hear say the person and a woman. Women sabai this finance thing show. I even hear say she young and sharp." Daniel kept his head low, silent, hoping nobody connected the dots. But all he could think of was the moment he would have to stand before Ivie, not as the head of the home he once claimed, not as a man who controlled her finances, but as a staff member depending on her approval. That evening he came home with a forced calm, but Ivie's presence made his heart pound. She was on the couch reviewing documents, her shoulders relaxed, her posture confident. She wasn't trying to intimidate him. She simply existed in her new power. Daniel looked at her and felt like a shadow beside a flame, shrinking slowly into the corner. And for the first time since they married, he realized something he had never allowed himself to believe. Ivie didn't rise in spite of him. She rose because she stopped waiting for him to recognize her worth. And now the world recognized it for him. The next morning, Daniel walked into the office with a nervousness he couldn't hide. His colleagues joked, laughed, made noise as usual. But his heart was heavy, thudding loudly against his ribs. Around noon, an urgent transaction request came in from a major client, Besa Holdings. The amount was huge. It had to be approved externally. He clicked the file, and immediately a red notification popped up. Approval required from Senior Controller, Mrs. Ivie Okoro. He froze. His mouth went dry. His palms grew sweaty. The office suddenly felt too small, too hot. His colleague beside him leaned over. "Ah, N.A. your wife now. Easy approval." Daniel forced a smile that felt like it cracked his soul. "Yes, easy," he whispered, even though nothing about this moment felt easy. He clicked the Send Approval Request button, and the system flashed. "Your request has been forwarded to Mrs. Ivie Okoro." Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, feeling smaller than he ever had in his entire life. Hours passed. His heart stayed in his throat. He pretended to work, but his mind was far away. At home, when he entered the house, Ivie was making tea, calm and serene. "Good evening," she said with a gentle voice. He hesitated. "Did you see any approval today?" Ivie glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I saw it." You approved it?" he asked, hoping. She didn't answer immediately. She placed her cup down, then looked him directly in the eyes. "I followed procedure." His heart dropped at the phrasing. Not "I approved it." Not "I helped you." Just "I followed procedure." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Ivie walked past him into the living room with a calm grace that made him feel invisible. She was not being petty. She was doing her job. She was not using power to take revenge. She didn't need to. Her success was revenge enough. That night Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his decisions pressed down on him like stones. For the first time, he couldn't deny it. He had created his own downfall. Eh. The day everything came crashing down began like any other. The office was buzzing, calls were ringing, systems blinking. Daniel sat at his desk, trying to focus, when suddenly a large transaction from Basic Holdings bounced back with a red error message. Transfer frozen. Approval required. Please visit the financial controller's office. His heart nearly exploded. Visit the office? Physically? In person? To meet? Huh? His manager walked over. Daniel, what are you waiting for? Go to their office and get the approval. We need this transaction processed today. Daniel nodded weakly, sweat dampening the back of his shirt. He drove to Basic Holdings with trembling hands. The building looked larger than he remembered, intimidating under the afternoon sun. He signed in at the reception. I'm here to see Mrs. Ivie Okoro. The receptionist smiled. She's expecting approvals today. Top floor. Daniel entered the elevator, each floor making his heart beat louder. When the doors opened, he saw her office door, Senior Financial Controller, Mrs. I. Okoro. He felt like a schoolboy walking into a principal's office. He knocked weakly. Come in, her calm voice said. He entered. Ivie sat behind a large desk, confident, elegant, composed. She looked up slowly. Their eyes met. Daniel's breath hitched. This was not the woman he once controlled. This was a woman in her power. He placed a file on her desk with shaking hands. The transfer, it was frozen. Ivie nodded, flipping the file without rush. Yes, I saw the error. You didn't attach supporting documents. Daniel swallowed. I forgot. I was rushing. She marked something on the file, her face unreadable. Process mistakes can be costly, Daniel. Your department should know better. He felt the sting of her words. Not harsh, just true. Can you approve it now? He whispered. Ivie closed the file and looked at him with quiet strength. I will approve it once proper documentation is submitted. Follow procedure. Daniel nodded, humiliated, his chest burning. He walked out of her office, feeling like the walls were closing in. For the first time in his life, Daniel understood something deeply painful. The woman he tried to weaken was now the woman he had to answer to. Daniel returned to his office feeling like he had been stripped of every shred of dignity. His colleagues asked casual questions. How far? You get him approved. But he only nodded stiffly, too ashamed to speak. He worked in silence, correcting every document Ivie requested, terrified of making another mistake. He sent a corrected file and prayed she wouldn't call him out again. Hours later, the approval notification popped up, approved by Mrs. Ivie Okoro. Daniel stared at her name, feeling a mixture of relief and humiliation wash over him. That night at home, Ivie cooked, served dinner, and carried herself with her usual calm. Daniel watched her with a painful ache in his chest. Ivie, he finally muttered. She looked up. Yes. Are you angry with me? He sounded like a child confessing to a broken window. Ivie wiped her hands and sat down. I'm not angry, Daniel. Anger is a waste of energy. Then why are you like this? He whispered. She looked him directly in the eyes. Because I finally understand who you became and who I needed to become. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted control. Ivie nodded. Yes, and you got it. But now life has balanced the equation. Daniel swallowed hard. Do you still love me? Ivie paused. The silence stretched. Then she spoke softly. Love is not the problem, Daniel. Respect is. The words cut deeper than any slap. Daniel lowered his head, tears burning behind his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. Ivie stood slowly. Daniel, sorry cannot undo what was done. But you have to learn that marriage is partnership, not dictatorship. She walked away, leaving him sitting alone, broken, ashamed, and finally aware of the damage he caused. He realized he didn't need revenge. Her growth itself was revenge enough. Her success was justice. Her peace was punishment. And his regret was a price. Weeks passed, and Daniel slowly adjusted to his new reality, a reality where his wife's signature was more powerful than his position, where he was no longer the dominant force in the marriage, where the woman he once tried to control now held a professional fate in her hands. But Ivie never abused her power. She never mocked him, never reminded him of what he did. She simply lived in her truth, in her strength, in the position she earned through pain, effort, and resilience. One Friday evening, Daniel came home early. He found her sitting on the balcony, sipping tea, staring at the soft orange sky. He walked toward her slowly, humbled. "Can I sit?" She nodded. They sat in silence for a while, the breeze brushing past them. Then Daniel spoke, voice quiet, shaky. "Ivie, I lost myself. I let pride destroy us. I wanted control because I was afraid of being less than you." Ivie looked at him gently. "You were never less than me, Daniel. You only became less when you tried to make me smaller." His heart cracked at that truth. Do I still have a chance to fix things? She looked back at the sky, thinking deeply. Then she answered, "Fix yourself first. That's where the real damage is." Daniel nodded, tears forming. For the first time, he accepted that he had been wrong, not just in his actions, but in his mindset. In the days that followed, he tried to rebuild, not by trying to regain control, but by learning humility, respect, and partnership. And slowly, Ivie allowed him back into her heart, but on new terms, stronger terms, equal terms. The man who once expected her to beg now waited patiently for her approval, not just on transactions, but in the marriage itself. And through that journey, Daniel learned the greatest lesson of his life. Power built on control collapses, but power built on respect endures. Ivie didn't just rise. She transformed. And in that transformation, she taught him the one truth he had tried so hard to avoid. A woman you try to cage will one day become the sky you have no choice but to look up to.